Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All of the intellectual properties is owned by the lecturers and the organizers, so please refrain from video or audio recording. To use simultaneous interpretation, click the interpretation button and choose either Japanese or English. There will be a Q&A session in the second half of the webinar. Those of you who have questions, please submit those questions to the Q&A section. It is now time to begin the webinar, leading from Colombia's migration policy implications to Asia, jointly organized by the Embassy of Colombia in Japan and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. In opening the webinar, Dr. Sunami Atsushi, President of SPF, will deliver opening remarks. Participants, thank you very much for joining the webinar, Learning from Colombia's Migration Policy Implication to Asia, jointly hosted by the Embassy of Colombia in Japan and our foundation. I am President of Sasakawa Peace Foundation. My name is Sunami. I would like to first of all thank Ms. Adriana Mejia, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Juan Francisco Espinosa, Director of the Migratory Authority of Colombia, and officials of the authority, Ambassador Santiago Pardo, and the members of the Embassy of Colombia to Japan, and the others who will be participating as commentators. Today, Mr. Espinosa will explain the policy of protection of migrants and refugees of Colombia by placing special focus on the pioneering initiative that Colombia has taken in the name of temporary protection status granted to Venezuelan refugees, which is experiencing the biggest humanitarian crisis in Latin America. The number of people forced out from their places of abode due to conflict, persecution, and climate change is reaching record highs, recording the worst level in the post-war world. But many countries, due to the pandemic, have to suspend the reception of refugees, and they are having difficulty in ensuring resources for support of refugees. So the Colombian government's watershed decision to protect the vulnerable refugees stands out in the global society. Why did the Colombian government make such a decision and policy, and how is this policy being administered? We're most honored to be able to have this opportunity to directly hear from the director. Until last week, the Japanese Diet was engaged in heated discussion on the policy of protection of refugees. The government gave up its attempt to have the bill to amend the Immigration Control and Refugee Recognition Act to be approved during the current Diet session, but interest is rising. Asian countries are also engaged in very active discussion at various levels, at communities, municipalities, national governments, and at the Asean level on how refugees are to be protected. Today, we're happy to have commentators from the Asian region, Dr. Hashimoto Naoko of Hitotsubashi University, Dr. Nino, Viartasiwi of Resilience Development Initiative, Mr. Rafendi Jami of the Human Rights Working Group. The three will share their expertise with us, ask questions, and conduct a bilateral, both-way conversation with Mr. Espinosa. We're looking forward to this. Sasakawa Peace Foundation is engaged in various activities on international migration in a cross-organizational manner. The Ocean Policy Research Institute is conducting studies on the immigrants who from the Pacific Island nations due to sea level rise. The Middle East and Islam Program Department is engaged in studies and research on mutual understanding between Japanese and those Muslims residing in Japan and inclusive society. At the Asia Peace Initiative Department, a study is underway on third country resettlement of refugees, as well as migrant workers and refugees within Asia. We're conducting various activities with experts in Japan and outside of Japan and practitioners. As part of such activities, Dr. Jami and Dr. Dr. Viartasiwi last year conducted a research on the impact of the pandemic to migrants and refugees in the Asian region. My heart ached with pain due to various issues that had been exposed. And at the same time, we were able to discover many good practices that are being introduced by government, civil society, and the business society. In the midst of continuing the pandemic, there's more divide in various areas of the world. The factors that entice these challenges over refugees is deeply entangled. There's no simple answer, but there are countries like Colombia who are taking the lead to implement valuable initiatives, and Asian countries are in practice implementing various measures, and there is global interest on the rise. People are thinking what they can do themselves and trying to act. We truly hope that those people will go beyond national borders and regional borders, collect their wisdom, encourage each other so that the situation will improve. We hope that this webinar will provide you with the opportunity to obtain the updated information on the protection of global refugees. Lastly, again, I would like to thank the speakers and the participants who will be contributing to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Sunami. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Santiago Pardo, Ambassador of Colombia to Japan, to make some opening remarks.
皆さんおはようございます。I want to first thank to Dr. Sunami, President of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, and all his team for the hard work joining forces with us here at the Embassy of Colombia in Japan and opening this window to raise the voice on the Venezuelan migratory crisis. Let me excuse Vice Minister Mejia. We switched places because she had to travel to the inauguration of the President of Ecuador, but she will join us later on. I am very glad that Director Juan Francisco Espinosa will explain our migratory policy as the best proof of Colombia's solidarity and commitment to protecting human rights in its territory, with particular consideration of the vulnerabilities that Venezuelan migrants have been facing. We are very fortunate today to have Dr. Hashimoto, Dr. Viartasiwi, and Mr. Demin's valuable comments. I am sure that they will bring relevant perspectives to the discussion today. Compared to migratory and refugee crises in other regions, these mass displacements might not be caused by an armed conflict, which might attract more global attention, but it results from an unprecedented human rights violation regime and the disruption of democracy in our neighboring country. Venezuelan migrants had to abandon their homeland due to violence, insecurity, repression, poverty, lack of access to food, medicines, and essential services. Confronted with this challenge, ranked as the second largest displacement crisis globally, Colombia has acted with unfailing fraternity and solidarity, investing significant financial and institutional resources, which continue to be committed despite the emergency caused by the COVID pandemic. The tight bonds between Colombia and Venezuela, forged by the proximity, have guided our international policy of solidarity. Compared to the financial cooperation granted per migrant in other crises, further resources are much needed, since in this case, all the effort has increased the burden on our country's fiscal expenditure. It is essential to continue raising awareness. That's why we are here today. Timely and flexible funding is crucial to prevent that capacity and resources reach a breaking point. We will have a great opportunity at the next International Donors Conference in solidarity with Venezuelan refugees and migrants, hosted by Canada on June 17 in this year, in collaboration with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and the International Organization for Migration to these purposes. It is vital for Colombia that these policies are successful. Although the major challenge ahead, we want to show to the world that it's possible to build on safe models for regular and organized migration in this crisis. We are confident that this event today can help to understand the situation. Thank you very much for everybody involved. Thank you very much for every one of you for attending this seminar. ありがとうございます。
パルド大使、ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Ambassador Pardo. And Director of Migration Colombia, Mr. Juan Francisco Espinosa. We would like to ask Mr. Espinosa to deliver his keynote presentation. He is leading the migration policy of Colombia. He's very busy, but to the people from Asia countries, he would like to have people know about the policy. So he would like to talk about how this temporary status, protection status is being operated in Colombia. Handing it over to you, Mr. Espinosa, please.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Sunami, and partners of this symposium. Thank you very much for this space. We are at this moment at 7 p.m. here in Bogotá on Monday. So this is a good night, but good morning there. So we're going to present shortly the situation of the migratory situation specifically in Venezuela and how Colombia has been acting to help these people. So it is common knowledge that since 2015, due to the weakening of the political and humanitarian conditions, as well as the hyperinflation in Venezuela, there has been a lack of food, medicine, and essential services, causing people to flee the country, seeking to escape from the regime, violence, insecurity, and threats. Next, please. These flows have led Colombia to become one of the main migrant destinations, currently hosting almost 1.8 million Venezuelans, of which as of January 2021, 56% have an irregular migratory situation. Now you will find that the orange part of the PowerPoint presentation corresponds to irregular migration, 56%, and the blue one, the regular migratory situation. And that means that between July, August, 2 years ago, there was a change of the composition of the behavior. And in that sense, at this moment, we have 56% of an irregular Venezuelans in an irregular migratory situation. Initially, these migratory dynamics were thought to be temporary. However, a large number of Venezuelan migrants who entered irregularly have the intention of staying here in Colombia. The consequences of not regularizing them are excessively unfavorable for the migrants and for Colombia. So let's put the next one, please. Before diving into the consequences of living in irregularity, it is important to have an overall picture of Colombia's location and geography. We share our land border with Panama, Ecuador, Brazil, and of course Venezuela, with 2,219 kilometers. And to put into perspective, the extension is similar to the eastern land border of France, with Germany, Luxembourg, Belgium, Switzerland, Italy, and Monaco. In the Colombian-Venezuela border, there are particular dynamics due to political, physical, social, and economic context, which is the reason monitoring the irregular migration is virtually impossible, given the extension, the geography, and other phenomena. So understanding the enormous challenge this situation possesses, the raw condition a person has to face to cross the border irregularly, as well as the lack of documentation, entails high risk for migrants. They include, please, the next one. They include living under dramatic situation of vulnerability, possibly facing exposure to violation of fundamental and human rights, dismemberment of family group, as well as discrimination, xenophobia, labor exploitation, exposure to criminal acts such as human trafficking or migrant smuggling, even potential criminal activity to the sorry, this is my child. Sorry, everybody. That's part of being a father. So this situation of these vulnerabilities of irregular migrants includes human trafficking or migrant smuggling, and even potential criminal activities due to lack of job opportunities. And all these conditions affect notably their life standards. But in any case, with regards to the impact in the host country, it potentially could lead to an increase of informal labor market, reduction of contributions to the economy, such as remittances and taxes, makes identification and prosecution difficult, which, along with the lack of access to the characterization of this population, limits the scope of public policies. So it is important to keep in mind that when migrants join the economy, they contribute tax and social security. And this is key, considering Latin America is going through one of the worst crises in its history as a result of the pandemic. So being aware of this context, please the next one. Thank you, aware of this context, among other actions carried out by Colombia since 2015, the country has registered as national more than 52,252 children with Venezuelan parents. That's not a simple number. And additionally, the government has granted migrants access to education, health, and early childhood programs. Specifically, there are 364,523 school enrollments, of which 96% of these children study in public schools. 88% of the Venezuelan students have an irregular status. As to health, 17.3% regular migrants have healthcare coverage. In total, there have been more than 9.3 million services to regular and irregular migrants. And additionally, regarding childhood and adolescence program, there have been 297,819 children covered by the Family Welfare Institute, of which 6,000 participate of administrative processes for the restoration of rights and the criminal responsibility system for adolescents. So taking into account all this information, instead of considering overly restrictive policies, Colombia opted for the regularization of the Venezuelan population, since experience shows that as long as there are high restriction and obstacles for regularization, the greater the irregularity is likely to be. Next one, please. Therefore, with the leadership of President Iván Duque, the Temporary Protected Status of Venezuelan Migrant, or TPSV, was formulated as a mechanism to offer protection to fundamental rights of migrants, and it will be implemented by the Colombian Migratory Authority, who I lead. So it is a mechanism to protect human rights of migrants fleeing their country. It includes the Unified Registry of Venezuelan Migrants and temporary permanency permit with a term for validity of 10 years, allowing, in this sense, Venezuelans to work in Colombia territory and access the public and private institutional offer. So subsequently, this process facilitates their transit to the ordinary regime of migratory regularization by obtaining a visa. And the characterization resulting from this process will enable Colombia to tear down a barrier, since it provides an approach to make a comprehensive assessment that allows the formulation of targeted public policies of integration aimed at generating well-being for migrants and their family, as well as their adaptation to host communities. So the TPSV has flexible measures to react and provide a minimum level of protection as a humanitarian response, enables entry permit and regular stay for foreigners fleeing the crisis in Venezuela, provides formal identification, registration, and documentation tools to recognize people in vulnerable conditions, and seeks protection of migrants who live in Colombia, not only those who intend to enter. So specifically, there are three main activities of the TSP. Please, next one. First, on yellow on the left side, online pre-registration in which biographical, demographic, facial biometrics, immediate family members, and preliminary evidence of permanence in the territory will be collected. The socioeconomic characterization survey will also be completed online. And this characterization is key since it enables to use us to channel international cooperation resources. And it will also allow us to move forward more efficiently in processes related to education and inclusion, as well as financial and health, including vaccinating the Venezuelan migrant population against COVID on equal terms as the Colombian nationals. Also, on-site biometric registration enrollment, which includes, that's the blue one, which includes facial, fingerprints, and signature data, as well as the validation of the information provided early in the process. With the foregoing, the issuance of the permit represents the restoration of the migrant dignity. It grants the rights and duties into the Colombian territory, and they will be able to recover self-confidence and trust in the society. This is a key point. Dignifying their situation, reducing xenophobia, reducing xenophobia and discrimination, as well as allowing them to access a regular job under conditions of equality. So the Unified Registry of Venezuelan Migrants, please, the next one, includes biometric, demographic, and biographic information for identification and characterization. The information cannot be used for sanctions. Migrants have to prove they were already in Colombian territory with different and flexible documents. And each registered person is responsible for keeping the information to date. As to temporary protection permit, the ID constitutes a regularization mechanism. It is a physical and digital document, both. It enables the person to stay in Colombia and pursue any legal activity, and credits times for type R visa. Of course, all this can only be possible if the Venezuelan migrants agrees to be part of the registry, and he or she cannot have legal and administrative processes. Our goals, next one, please. For 2021, include 1.5 million pre-registered Venezuelans, of which 800,000 people are expected to make the online process on their own, and 700,000 are estimated to be assisted in specific booths. Additionally, we're going to achieve the enrollment of 800,000 Venezuelans this year with their specific document. So the TPSV, next one please, has an innovative approach. It has 10-year window for those with the intention of staying in Colombia. That means 2.5 periods of presidential periods here in our country. It enables transit to obtain a visa. It enables the Venezuelan irregular migrants to apply for the TPSV for those who entered in the country before February 2021. It allows regular migrants passing through an immigration checkpoint within the next 2 years to apply the TPSV, which means there is no need for them to mobilize massively. It tears down barriers by generating trust among different actors and establishments such as banks and potential employers. It introduces an integrated facial fingerprint and signature identification along with a multi-biometric recognition engine. And I would like to point that Colombia is the first country to implement the TPS in Latin America. Through regularization and characterization, Colombia is committed to support Venezuelan migrants, reaffirming their rights and generating a whole infrastructure to them, to integrate them. Next one. And of course, there are some challenges the country is facing in order to integrate the Venezuelan migrants into society. Regarding the health sector, the deficit in the social security system, the mass vaccination and strengthening territorial capacities are some of the variables we have to work on. As to education, we have to improve the coverage along with increasing the permanence rates, provided necessary supplies, make the necessary curricular content adjustments, among others. And we also have to improve the infrastructure as well as increase the territorial and technical capacity to enhance the coverage of the childhood and adolescence program. So taking into account these challenges deriving from the implementation of the TPSV, it is clear that there have to be joint efforts from different public institutions. This means we are working on coordinating processes between national and local authorities. Colombia's government has determined 5 key or enabling sectors to achieve effective inclusion of Venezuelan migrants. These are work, education, health, childhood and adolescence, and as well as social program. With this effort, there have been some specific actions that have been established to allow the TPSV to be successful and guarantee access to the basic institutional offer and promote the same living standards and Colombian nationals. Therefore, there are different scenarios for the coordination of different sectors, finance, statistics, social policy, among others, in order to integrate the Venezuelan migrants into society, promote the access to social programs, and generate tools to measure and follow the impact of the economy. So it is important to note that TPSV is a path and not a final destination. And in this sense, there is a real possibility for people with a lack of opportunities who have lost hope to have another chance and even establish themselves in the country. However, aside from the mechanism provided by Colombia to integrate migrants into society, we have to keep in mind the responsibility of going forwards depends on great measure on the international cooperation, effort from other countries, as well as the migrants' will. Colombia has also promoted and will continue to lead efforts to mobilize a coordinated response among the countries hosting Venezuelan migrants, encouraging the support of international community to address the humanitarian response to the multidimensional crisis. Next, please. And lastly, understanding we are citizens of the world, we have witnessed the determination of the Venezuelan migrants. We recognize everyone deserves opportunities for a better future, which is the reason we want to make our contribution to support this population by promoting better living standards for them. We encourage the international community to walk along with us and with them down this path. Thank you very much. And I will be here for any questions and of course, all the comments. Thank you very much.
エスピノザ長官、ありがとうございました。
ありがとう。
Thank you very much. That was Mr. Espinosa. By increasing precision, reducing the vulnerability, very effective mechanism has been introduced and a focus on collaboration with relevant stakeholders is very important. Those were some of the messages. We would like to now ask comments from the regional commentators and experts. Could the 3 commentators place their cameras on? The first person is Dr. Hashimoto Naoko, Associate Professor, Hitotsubashi University. She's an expert on refugee and migrant policy, and she has practical experience in Japanese governments and international organizations. Asian refugee is her expert field, and she is well aware of the global trend. She will talk about global refugee policy by placing special focus on Japan, and she will ask questions to Mr. Espinosa. Dr. Nino Viartasiwi, Senior Research Fellow of Resilience Development Initiative, is the second commentator. Nino is an expert on the inclusive society of refugees. Nino has conducted a study on inclusive society with between refugees and urban citizens. Nino will speak about local community and ask questions to Mr. Espinosa. The third person is Mr. Refugee Jami, Senior Advisor, Human Rights Working Group. 6 years, he was the ASEAN representative of Inter-ASEAN Human Rights Organization. ASEAN Human Rights, migrant labor, and international migrant mobility are some of his expert fields. He has a strong trust from ASEAN countries, and he is a great mentor for me. And he will be speaking from the regional perspective and will be asking questions to Mr. Espinosa. My name is Okamoto of SPF. I will be serving as the MC for this session. Now I give the floor to Dr. Hashimoto.
Yes, I would like to make my intervention in English, if it's okay, to the interpreter as well. So thank you very much, Senor Director Espinosa. I was truly impressed with the innovativeness and humanitarianism and also pragmatism demonstrated by your temporary protection initiative. So I would like to pay my tribute to the honorable initiative taken by your government. Before I would go to the kind of global comparison and also express my questions, I would like to provide you with a bit of historical background, how Latin America has been addressing forced migration issues historically. Latin America, including Colombia, has been well known for its long-term tradition of extending asylum and refuge for foreign nationals and other vulnerable individuals. So let me give you four examples to demonstrate such humanitarian tradition in your region. First is the practice of diplomatic asylum. Some Latin American countries and Latin American embassies abroad receive and consider asylum applications lodged by people facing persecution while they are still in the countries of origin. And this is often called in-country asylum process as well. So we live in an era where the vast majority of wealthy countries, including Japan, require visa acquisition prior to travel and arrival. And this visa requirement effectively deters potential asylum seekers from reaching your territory and thereby pushes them to the hands of smugglers and traffickers to resort to illegal means of entry. So compared to this global trend, the value of diplomatic asylum or in-country asylum process that has been historically implemented in your region should be highly commended and reappreciated, in my opinion. Second example is the Cartagena Declaration on Refugees, adopted in Colombia, in your country, and implemented in the region since 1984. This Cartagena Declaration adopts a much wider refugee definition than the one contained in the 1951 Refugee Convention. And many Latin American countries have incorporated the Cartagena refugee definition into your domestic legislation to ensure local implementation. The third example is regarding the internally displaced persons, or IDPs. In 1998, the then UN Commission on Human Rights adopted the guiding principles on internal displacement, which sets forth a number of very important principles in relation to protecting and assisting IDPs. The guiding principles on internal displacement are not legally binding on its own. However, the domestic legislation of Colombia most extensively incorporates the IDP principles, and the Colombia legislation is known as one of the most developed domestic legislations in relation to IDPs in the world. The fourth example is resettlement of refugees, still far away, such as Palestinians, to some Latin American countries, such as Argentina, Chile, Brazil, and Uruguay. This increasing refugee resettlement to Latin American countries highlights the spirit of solidarity, as Director mentioned, that is widespread in your region, in my opinion. So building upon these concrete examples, 4 examples that I mentioned, the recent temporary protection status conferred to Venezuelans is another step to further such historically humanitarian tradition in the region. So please allow me to repeat my admiration to your political decision. Now I would like to briefly compare Colombia's temporary protection scheme with similar initiatives or measures in other regions to highlight the importance and the value. So for instance, in 2001, the European Union adopted Temporary Protection Directive. It would have been perfect if the EU Temporary Protection Directive had been invoked for the Syrian refugees and forced migrants. However, the EU Temporary Protection Directive has never been implemented so far for various political and diplomatic reasons among the EU member states. So in a sense, it is a sort of pie in the sky, if you like. And in fact, Japan is no exception to this trend. In fact, Japan's Immigration Control and Refugee Recognition Act, enacted in 1982, already has a provision concerning landing permission for temporary refuge in its Article 18. However, a very few people have so far benefited from this temporary refuge provision available in the Japanese immigration law. And I don't think that various potential surrounding the temporary refuge measure available in the Japanese asylum law have yet to be fully realized. So I think Japan could actually learn from the Colombian experience. So based upon this historical background and also the kind of global comparison, let me now move on to 2 sets of questions that I would like to put to Senior Director Espinosa. The first question is the relation to IDPs, as I mentioned, and the other is the temporariness of the scheme. So the first question is this. As I already mentioned, Colombia has long been affected by the problems of internal displacement. And according to the recent statistics, your country still has 5 million internally displaced people. Obviously, your government would be required to take care of your own people first. Meanwhile, your government decided to take this temporary protection scheme initiative on behalf of Venezuelan refugees and displaced persons. So my question is this: how did your government convince Colombian people of the importance of solidarity with vulnerable foreigners while having 5 million people domestically displaced in your own, among your own citizens? In other words, how do you intend to strike the delicate balance between your primary responsibility for your own people on the one hand, and extending asylum and humanitarianism to foreign and vulnerable foreign nationals on the other? This is my first question. The second question is this: what would happen if the Venezuelan cannot return in 10 years, which is the validity of the temporary protection scheme? I certainly hope that the current crisis, Venezuelan crisis, is going to be solved quickly. And there's nothing wrong in theory and as a matter of law to perceive displacement something temporary, or up to until the persecution claim is completely eradicated in a sustainable manner. However, in reality, many refugees do not or cannot go home and stay permanently. There's an the one internationally renowned scholar, Dr. Philip Martin, once said this: there is nothing more permanent than temporary migration. And in the US, for example, there are millions of foreign nationals on temporary protection status for more than 2 decades. And they are effectively in a kind of limbo situation between being unable to go home while being unable to integrate locally either. So my question is this, what your government, Colombian government, plans to do if the Venezuelans cannot go home within 10 years? I mean, in other words, what are the exit strategies anticipated at this stage? Thank you very much. I look forward to listening to your answers. Thank you.
橋本先生、ありがとうございました。
Dr. Hashimoto, thank you very much. You mentioned a few examples to showcase the effects of Colombian policies and the balance with IDPs as well as the temporariness were the questions you had asked. Now I give the floor to Mr. Espinosa.
Thank you very much. 2 huge questions, really difficult. So first, this is like an exam of a PhD or something like that, but I will try to answer. First, how to convince about solidarity. Look, Colombia is a middle income country. We are not rich, but we are very generous in what we believe that being generous is to share what we have. And that means that at this moment, we have here in our country 1.8 million people, where from those 1.8, more than 22% are kids. So it is impossible to say no to a kid. Actually, you see it a few minutes ago with my child, sorry, again. And in that sense, our country is constructed by people that share at all times. And what we are doing is to present migration as a necessary path to help people, but to construct a better nation. Colombia is not a nation constructed by migrants. We're like a mix of indigenous and different kind of country, different than what happens in Argentina, in Chile, or Italy or France, that includes a lot of migrants. We're not that case. So at this moment, we have people with some scare, with some concerns about this situation, but we're at all times speaking about this and saying, look, this is not how about we invite 1.8 million people. This is how we recognize 1.8 million people here in Colombia in a huge consideration of vulnerability with more than 22% of kids. So this is how we can construct a better nation, and that's how we are managing that. But in any case, I have to say it very clearly, we need international support because this is so expensive. And in that sense, it is impossible for a country of mid-income to pay everything about an additional pressure of 1.8 million people that are not all vulnerable people, but they're in any case not rich people, in any case. So secondly, what will happen after 10 years? That's another tough question. Why 10 years? First, because the idea of the TPS is that the people of Venezuela, those 1.8 million initially, can found a job, can start some business, and after that, get some income to pay a residence visa path. Why? Because the visa of residence, as you explained, it is a huge cost. That means more than $400,000 US dollar per person. So with a person of a family with 5 kids, it's impossible to pay it. But in addition, you will have to prove 5 years regularly in Colombia. And those Venezuelans are 56% irregularly. So that will not happen. So 10 years, it is considered by, let's try to find a job. Let's try to make some business. You will have income. And after that, and with a process of 5 years, you will ask for a visa residence. 10 years, we hope that Venezuela will recover democracy. I mean, we really hope that. And in addition, all of these persons, as you mentioned, the migration with economic costs implies that after the migrant goes to a different country and start taking some money, he will change completely their lives and will start a new home. So that means that Colombia at this moment has 1.8 million people in addition, and that will not change. Because once you have a person with some regular employment, something like that, they will not leave the country. This is not normal. So we're thinking about 10 years of opportunities. 10 years where the Venezuelans will be located in the middle or in the center, and they had to make a decision. And the decision is to advance. The TPS, it's like a highway, and it's an opportunity. It depends, obviously, on the person. If you want to go faster, you can do it. But if you want to go to another place, you can do it. But what we are doing here is to give you a huge highway for people that needs for 22% of kids. So maybe at the end of these 10 years, the government in place can say we will extend it for 5 years in addition or not, because it is possible. But in this moment, what we are doing is let's concentrate on first phase. Let's include people. Let's find jobs. Let's do the socioeconomic survey and understand migration phenomena. And that we will see after 10 years. Sorry for the extensive questions, but we're not easy questions. Sorry. Arigato.
Espinosa 長官、ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Mr. Espinosa. Tolerance and giving an opportunity to migrants. That's very impressive. Next, moving to Dr. Nino. Can we go to Dr. Nino?
And thank you, SPF, for the opportunity. Good morning for all participants in Asia and good evening for everyone in Latin America. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Espinosa, for very engaging presentation. I learned a lot actually from the Colombian migration policy. Then can be used as a lesson learned, especially for other countries in Southeast Asia. Yeah? The refugee situation in Colombia is, of course, very different from the situation in Southeast Asia region or in Indonesia. So to give a comparison, to give a background, please allow me to explain a little bit about Indonesian refugee protection, that so that we can have a more clearer comparison model, yeah, with the Colombian model. Yeah, Indonesia hosts only around 13,000 refugees. They came from many countries, not too many. Yeah, 13,000 refugees come from many countries. So the top three are Afghanistan, Somalia, and Iraq. So it's very far from Indonesia. It's not neighboring countries. And the number is very small in comparison, of course, with the Colombia, yeah, 1.8 million Venezuelan migrants. Meanwhile, as the world's fourth most populous country, Indonesian population in 2021 is around 276 million. So refugees and asylum seekers in Indonesia are only around 0.005% of the Indonesian population. So very, very small. Other countries in the Southeast Asia region has many more refugees, and Malaysia hosts around 100,000 refugees, mostly from Myanmar, 170,000 refugees, mostly from Myanmar, Pakistan, Yemen, and others, but mostly from Myanmar. And Thailand hosts around 69,000 refugees, mostly from neighboring countries. They don't have many from far country. Yeah? So even though the number of refugees in Indonesia is relatively small, Indonesian government still does not have adequate regulation for refugee protection management. Indonesia is not a party to the 1951 Refugee Convention or the protocol, and the only regulation of refugee protection in Indonesia is a presidential decree that was released in 2016. That's the only one. And Indonesian refugee protection until now is relying very much on non-state actors such as international organizations, the UN Refugee Agencies or UNHCR, and the International Organization for Migration or IOM, and also local NGO, international NGO, private sectors, and concerned individuals, not so much from the government. The good news is that there is no refugee detention or camps, refugee camps in Indonesia. All refugees and asylum seekers live peacefully among the locals. Refugee in Indonesia is not being here for forever. They are in the transit situation where they're waiting for the decision of their resettlement application to UNHCR. So they are expected in a temporary situation. However, because of the limited opportunity for resettlement and conflict, and ongoing conflict in many origin countries, prevent those refugees to returning home, this transiting stage can be prolonged into many years. There are refugees who have been in Indonesia for 8 years in transit situation. And to be noted, refugees and asylum seekers in Indonesia are not permitted to work. They don't have rights to work. They don't have access to national healthcare system, and they have limited access to education, even for children. So this is also the difference with the Colombian government. Refugee children in Indonesia who are lucky to gain access to school, for example, cannot access a government school funding, and they cannot receive diploma or certification after finishing this school because they do not have the rights to be given national student number. So they just like sitting in the school, but they don't have the certification of legal proof that they have been into school. And there are two categorization of refugees and asylum seekers in Indonesia. First is refugees under IOM, International Organization for Migration Support. Those refugees under IOM are those who are registered by IOM and those who are intercepted in their travel to Australia. So they were intercepted when they were in travel by boat. Yeah, there are around 8,000 refugees and asylum seekers under IOM support. They receive community housing, monthly support, very modest one, modest monthly support with the standard of the household of the host community, and also medical care. And the second category is refugees is independent or self-sufficient refugees who live by their own with small assistance from private sectors and concerned individual. But Indonesian government regulates that the local government is the responsible party in refugee protection in their territories, with cooperation with international organization, non-state actor, and central government. So the responsibility is on the local government, but they don't they don't get the provision of funding to fund the refugees in the local areas in the city. So refugee protection management in Indonesia varies from one city to another depending on the commitment of the local leaders to involve and provide protection for the refugees. So my team has been conducting research in Indonesia, action research, to find the possibility of social integration among refugee youth and local youth. And at that time, we received considerable support from the local governments. It's also showed that the positive interest to being active in refugee management. Last year, our team also conducted a series of consultation, workshop, seminar with various refugees, stakeholders, both in Indonesia and in Southeast Asian region. And we have some interim conclusion to see how the refugee management in Indonesia. Yeah, first, compared to other ASEAN countries, Southeast Asia countries, which is Malaysia and Thailand, local government and NGOs in Indonesia tend to be more proactive in taking the initiative on filling the gap in refugee management. NGO in Indonesia also have the privilege to the refugee management as well as advocacy. Yeah? And second, although Indonesia does not have specific regulation, Indonesia local community is more hospitable in accepting refugees in compared to Malaysia and Thailand. But however, there are still negative perception, yeah, in some contexts, when refugees are perceived as a threat or an element of disturbance instead of potential element for development. So the third one is we see that providing refugee livelihood opportunities is precarious in Indonesia because they are not allowed to work now. So in the meantime, they are okay because some organizations are still supporting them, but we don't know in the future. So we need more breakthrough, and the Colombian model probably can be used as a model for a breakthrough for refugee protection in Indonesia. And also we see that social integration program is very much needed to lessen the potency of conflicts in the society. In our team, in our research, we see that social integration can be defined both as a goal and also as a skill process, social skill process. So this is process of integrate is very much needed as a skill, yeah. And finally, for Southeast Asia, we suggest that building refugee management in city level is more like manageable. It will be more effective than the national model of refugee management. Those are the difference with the Colombian model, yeah. But comparing the Colombian refugee protection model and the Indonesia and the Southeast Asia model, we see that I have to second Dr. Hashimoto appreciation that Colombian model of refugee protection is a brave and inspiring move. This is something that we in Southeast Asia, we are in the stagnant situation, stalemate situation of what to do next with the refugee situation. And this is like giving us an inspiration to do something. Because we see that the declining resettlement trend and the rising number of involuntary migration, and Colombia model like giving us the inspiration we can do, like giving the time frame and putting more responsibility to states to offer more avenues for refugee protections. So the Colombian government has entered the mindset of prolonged refugee crisis situation, while the government in Southeast Asia still in the mindset of temporary displacement situation. So because of the still thinking in this temporary framework, their action is also temporary and not sustainable. It's like very ad hoc. So this Colombian government giving the time frame of 1 decade, 10 years, like giving some this is very important for 2 reasons. Yeah, I think first it will ease actually the anxiousness of local society toward the arrival of foreigners in their land. So they have this mindset that will only be here for 10 years. It's lessen the anxiousness of the local society, the time frame, and also the temporary status. It will be it will help to give the security feelings for the host communities to welcoming refugees, because they will not be here forever. Yeah, the next scenario is the next scenario, of course, but in the meantime, 10 years is much more. It can be imagined, and it will lessen the anxiousness of those host communities. Secondly, the status give refugee ample time actually to build their lives in the host community in dignity. This is giving them dignity to build their lives. Yeah. In turn, it will be giving them opportunity to contribute to the society and prepare the next step in their lives, whether it's to resettle in a third country in the case of Indonesian and Southeast Asia refugees, in the context of Indonesia and Southeast Asia refugees, or to return to their home countries. And it is like make the best out of the protracted situation right now. So from this comparison, the different situation, very different situation between the Colombian situation and the Southeast Asia situation, I want to ask some very simple question. Actually, I have a question as Hashimoto-san, Dr. Hashimoto question about the how Colombian society accept those newcomers, and what is the next scenario after the 10 years. But my question will be before that, I think, because we want to take a lesson learned. We want to take this as a good practice. We also want to know the process. How did the process of the bill, how did the process of the policy were taken? Like, what was the process, and how did the public react when the initiative was first published to the public before the decision is concluded? Yeah. So how did the public react to when the initiative was published, and what was the process after that to come to this conclusion, to come to this stage? Yeah. And also, what was the political social dynamic that put pressure on the release of the TPSV actually? Because we want to see, because in Southeast Asia, newcomers, foreigners are always become a sensitive factors. Yeah. In Southeast Asia, we are post-colonial countries, so we have different sensitiveness and different feeling of threatened. Yeah. Like more sensitive to the feeling of threat. So what was the political social dynamic that put pressure on the release of TPSV in Colombia? Because we want to learn from that, and we want to see the step. So if we have to take the same path, we know what to do. Thank you so much. I return back the stage and the screen to Okamoto-san. Thank you so much, Mr. Espinosa.
ニノさん、ありがとうございます。アジア諸国の学び受け
Thank you very much, Dr. Nino. Learnings that we can take from the Colombian policy and the policy in Colombia. We think about asylum seekers protection. It was so inspirational as we will be developing policies here in Southeast Asia. And the question for Mr. Espinosa is that in implementing this new policy, what was the process that was followed, and what kind of political dynamics were there in putting into place this policy? To the extent possible, Mr. Espinosa, can you respond to this question? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a night of hard questions, but okay. First, the key word is communication. We started a process with two groups of people targeted to communicate. First, Colombian people, and secondly, Venezuelans. For Colombian people, what we said was, hey, we have a reality of 1.8 million here. Look the appearance, look the condition of vulnerability of the people, and we started a process based on our three-color flag. You will find it that this is my flag with three colors. So what we do was to start saying to Colombian people, this will not change Colombian people, and this not implies that Venezuelans resign to be Venezuelans and to be Colombians. No, we'll be different by different nationalities, because according to your second question also, here, unfortunately, some people start saying this is a political strategy, because this is you're gonna use those migrants as votants, and that's not possible. It's not possible because of the law, because it's forbidden. I mean, that was crazy. So what we do was, hey, this is Colombia, we can help. The process includes 3 stages. So we identified each one of the stages with our code of flag. The first one is yellow, the second is blue, and the last one red. The first one is all the process through internet, virtual. The second is presential, or in front of Colombian Migratory Authority, who I lead. And the last one, the red, is the process where they will have an ID document in Colombia. So at all times, we're talking about the colors in yellow, in blue, and red, saying, hey, this is Colombia, and you should be proud of helping people. Second, the communicating Venezuelans was, hey, this is an alternative of rights, but also duties. Also, you will have to be at all times playing in the same scenario in Colombia. You will have to respect law at all times. So that means two sides of a coin. And that helps us for Venezuelans to say, hello, welcome to democracy and rule of law that you must comply. And for Colombians, it is okay to have some concerns, but please don't start with scare. Let's start with doubt, but not with the scare. And in that sense, we will construct a better country. That's how we're managing this situation, but at all times is communicating at all times, Facebook Live, in the media, in the newspapers, in the radio, explaining and discussing as we are doing here in this moment, actually. Thank you.
スピノサ長官、ありがとうございました。それでは続
Thank
き
you
ま
very
して、
much, Mr. Espinosa. Now, Mr. Raffendi Jami, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Fumiko. I'd like to thank SPF as well as Colombian government for inviting me to share some thought and some comments. To very impressive explanation or presentation from Mr. Juan Francisco Espinosa. I learned a lot from your presentation. What struck me most, comparing to the situation in our region, is actually the situation which is related to the political crisis in Venezuela, 2015 until now, and it is also a political crisis in the context of Myanmar, which is part of the ASEAN countries. As you know, the numbers is also reaching the same numbers that you are having. It is probably now about 1.3 million people displaced or forced evacuated from the border of Myanmar to Bangladesh. The different thing is, in terms of regional bloc, the people are mostly seeking refuge to Bangladesh, which is not part of the ASEAN countries, while the ASEAN countries are more affected, less affected by the flux of the people who are seeking protections to Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia. And the different context, of course, it is called maritime refugees. Yeah, maritime refugees with very different challenges compared to the situation in the mainland in your region. So it was a very impressive in the context of similarity, and I'm very much impressed as well on the use of technology. I think your model has been able to maximize, to utilize the benefit of technology in creating the stages of the process of temporary protections mechanisms, and very much based on the human rights values and norms as that has driven the creation of such policy. And this is also very much related with it is a very huge exercise of building up a political will of a country in creating such such policies towards the flux of people seeking for refugees. And Indonesia never have that kind of experience, you know. Even in other countries in ASEAN doesn't have such a huge experience as you have. What, as I mentioned earlier, the situation in Myanmar affect very much on the country outside of ASEAN, which is South Asia. It has a different intergovernmental organizations. They are under the SARC, and in ASEAN, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, and Myanmar is under the ASEAN, under the Intergovernmental Cooperation of ASEAN. So having said that kind of impression, I have actually 2 or 3 questions, Mr. Espinosa. This is not examination. This is a learning. This is not a PhD examination. I like your response when you said it looks like a PhD examination. I was asked to give a question on regional response. You mentioned in your presentation the importance of international cooperation. But before you go to international cooperation, I'm sure you have dealt with your regional organization, yeah, the regional organization, the Organization of American Association, the OAU. My question is, what is the regional response to this situation? Because I think although the flux of migration of people seeking refugee, about 1.8 million heading to your area, your country in Colombia, but I'm sure it will also affect the borders that you mentioned earlier, where Colombia also has borders with different countries in the region. So I'm sure that the Organization of Americans nation has already made some response on this. And asking the response, what is the regional response and how you utilize this regional response, that will be my first question. Because in the context of ASEAN, probably as a background, in the context of ASEAN, we have the ASEAN, and ASEAN responds through the ASEAN Humanitarian Assistance Agency. It is an official agency of the ASEAN's bodies who are dealing with the humanitarian challenge, including now, it is a new portfolio, humanitarian caused by conflict. That's a new portfolio has been granted to this institution. Before it was purely for a natural humanitarian crisis. But now this agency has been mandated as well to deal with the non-natural humanitarian crisis. So we have the AHA Center. So, and then in the context of the ASEAN as well, related to Bangladesh, we have a body which is looking at the issue of the people smuggling and trafficking. It is called the Bali process. Bali process consists more than 10 member countries of ASEAN. It has memberships across the border of ASEAN, with India, the huge country, with Bangladesh is also a member of this Bali process mechanisms. But probably Bali process mechanisms, it is different with ASEAN. It is a chair-driven institution because it is co-chaired by Indonesia and Australia. So it was Australia and Indonesia who are actually leading the process to have an intergovernmental collaboration. You know, initially it was very much on the perspective of security, you know, to prevent people smugglings and traffickings because of those situations. But in the process, after more than 1 decade of this Bali process, they are more and more looking as well into the whole social aspect of and human rights aspect of this phenomena. So Bali process is there, and ASEAN is there in helping to solve the situation of international and regional collaboration. So that will be my first question. Mr. Espinosa? How is the regional response and how you deal with that? And my second question, probably very much related with question from our earlier speaker, is the internal agencies. I'm amazed that you are, of course, you have to work with different institutions within your government, health ministers, education ministers, and the social ministers. And in our countries, it is always very difficult to really coordinate, this social and then education and health, while your institution, it is more on the law enforcement officials. It is more to the security officials, security institution. So there's always a difficulties of a security institution will have to work with the social ministerial agencies related to the social sectors. So that would be my question. How is this interagency collaborations in the context of, and you are taking the lead in the process, and you have to deal with the Ministry of Health, Education, and Child and Adolescents programs. And my third question, probably more in the context of Colombia and Venezuela. So if I compare the situation in Bangladesh and Myanmar, since the beginning of the crisis, there is already an attempt, to set up a dialogue between these two countries, is Bangladesh and Myanmar, because Myanmar is a resource countries for the flux and Bangladesh is the destination. But the durable solution will be actually more going back to the countries of origin. Yeah, so that means it's the beginning. There has been already engagement, very close engagement with the source countries. So my question is, how do you collaborate with the source countries in the context, given as well, of course, with the context that political crisis is going on? It is also the same case in Myanmar. The political crisis is going on, but all humanitarian collaboration with Bangladesh will have to be continued in the work of protections, the more than 1.3 million Rohingyas in the territory of Bangladesh. I think I stopped there my question. Thank you so much.
ヘンリーさん、ありがとうございました。リージョナルレスポンスをどういうふうに考えるかということ、それから省庁間の連携。
Thank you very much, Jamin. Regional response, inter-ministerial collaboration, and finally, dialogue between Colombia and Venezuela. Those were the questions. And now I give the floor to Mr. Espinosa.
Well, very, very interesting questions also. So, how to deal with regional response? This is difficult because at the end, Venezuelan people is traveling not also to Colombia. At the end, more than 5 million of Venezuelans have abandoned Venezuela, and 35% are in Colombia. 35. The other one are in the other parts of the world, but with a hard presence in our other border countries. So we tried to multilateral mechanism to solve the situation, but at the end, what we decide under the leadership of our president was to, hey, let's implement the first TPS of Latin America as an example. Why? Because this is important not only for 1.8 million people. This is important as an example, and it's important as words of yes, it is possible. If a middle income country as Colombia can implement a TPSV, any country of Latin America can do it. So this is an example, and the whole structure has been doing at all time, saying to our neighborhood, hey, this is possible. Hey, you should do it. Hey, I can give you for free my whole experience in order to continue this opportunity for people. And today, the new president of Ecuador took the office today. And here in a visit as elected president in Colombia said, I like the TPS. I want to learn more. I think this is the proper path. So what we're doing, it's not only helping 1.8 million. What we're doing is teaching by example and saying, hey, this is possible. And maybe if we work together, we will help more people. And this is normal for countries for rich countries, but a middle income country in the middle of a pandemic situation, it is really hard. But if we can make it, we will be a good example for the region and for the migratory processes. Secondly, a key issue, how to coordinate, because you said properly, at the end, I'm a law enforcement agency. The Migratory Authority is a law enforcement authority. But in this case, the leadership of the process is in the President of Colombia. I used to be Deputy Minister of Justice. And the President said, Juan, I need you as the head of the migratory agency. And we started to construct the TPS. So at this moment, the leadership is in our head of government by the president, who calls me every 2 weeks or every week saying, hello, let me know, what do you need? And at the end, this is some particular situation. He told me, Juan, please let me know whatever you need by any ministry, and I will call. And he is honoring his word, because whatever I need for an education perspective, I call him, Mr. President, I need this help. Okay, and he calls to the Ministry of Education. So that's why it's working. It is not normal, and you touch, and this is a perfect, great point. It is not normal that the migratory institution is doing this. Maybe it's an opposite, maybe. But in any case, it's because of the leadership of our president, and I'm very proud of that. And because at the end, we mentioned this is a highway of opportunities. But when you start saying a person, hey, this is your card, you're only starting a path. So we have to work in inclusion, in education, in health, from a financial perspective, from a labor perspective. That's the huge challenge. This is the way that we're starting, but we need to work with the whole government saying, okay, you will need to help me because I need some education position for I don't know, 10,000 kids in some town in Colombia. That's the huge challenge. And the last one, why is happening the migratory situation of Venezuela? Because of a regime. I have to say that no matter how many times I travel to the border zone, at all times, my heart is hurting really, really bad, because the situation of these people is not normal, because they don't have food, because they don't have vaccines, because they don't have anything. So this situation will continue as long as the regime continue fighting their own people. And what's Colombia? Colombia is the neighbor. That's it. So we decide to start thinking more in people and not in a regime or in a situation that we really don't know how long we'll be there. And that's not responsibility of Colombia. This is responsibility of the world. This is responsibility of United Nations. I mean, everybody has to check and to say, hey, you cannot do that to your own people, because that's the situation at the end. So we are helping people, and I'm working with people and praying, and our president is trying to find on a worldwide basis to change that, to restore democratic situation in Venezuela. That will be a great news for a lot of people, including Colombia, because we have additional pressure, but we're helping people. That I hopefully try to answer your 3 questions, but not easy questions.
スピノザ長官、ありがとうございました。ですね。
Mr. Espinosa, thank you very much for wonderful comments. And let us also thank the commentators. And thank you, Mr. Espinosa, for answering those difficult questions. And we actually are receiving many questions from the audience, but we're starting to run out of time. So therefore, let me just pick one. In this COVID-19, how do you find the necessary funding for vaccination so that vaccinations can be given to Venezuelan refugees? That's the question that we have received. And also, lastly, if we could get one last message to the audience in Asia, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, look, this point, when you have irregular migrants, you cannot start vaccinating them because you don't know what they have. I mean, the age, and you don't know if they have some diseases. So first point is to start knowing your migrants, and that starts with the survey of socio-economical situation that we're working and applying at this moment. So the decision of our president was, we will apply vaccines not according nationality, according to human situation. And that means that at this moment we're absorbing or we're applying vaccines to Venezuelans older than 80 years, 70 years, and in the same path that Colombians. But in any case, what we're doing with the international cooperation is to find additional vaccines under the situation that we don't have it. I mean, the whole world has some difficulties for vaccines. So what we're saying to US, to Canada, to Europe, it's, hey, help us with some quantity of vaccines, and we will apply it to Venezuelan people in Colombia. And that's what we are doing right now. In January, we will have the Assembly of Donors of Canada to support Venezuelan situation. So hopefully we will have next month higher cooperation and better results from a vaccine perspective. And finally, if I understand it, okay, look, this is a hard path. It is not easy. It implies some concerns, some situations that scare somebody, but at the end, what we're doing is to think in people and to try help people, because I think that the world is advancing very fast, protecting a lot of things. Maybe some industries, maybe some animals, maybe some countries, I don't know, some things, but maybe we're losing about protecting people. And this is about the TPS. Because let me say like this, the distance, the walking distance between the border zone and Bogota, where I am, it's 22 days, sorry, walking all the day, every day. And that's what Venezuelans people are doing. And that means that they don't have nothing to lose. That means that people is trying to find anything, no matter what. And in that sense, what we have to do as a social community, as a society is to help. And if we help, they will never, never forget that help. And we will construct a better country, a better region, and we will advance without any doubt. So I have to congratulate our ambassador Pardo, because this is the top seminarium that I have been since we started the TPS. This has been a great space with great people, with very smart questions, and with a high attitude discussion. So thank you very much for the wonderful place to speak as we're doing here, and hopefully want to see you in Japan in person. Maybe in some time will be our honor to be there. Thank you very much.
野田長官、ありがとうございました。大変光栄に思います。はい、それではあっという間に。
Thank you very much, Mr. Espinosa. We're so honored with those compliments. Time flew. It's already time to finish. There had been some change in the program. Today, we had asked the Vice Minister for the speech, but she had to go to a separate appointment and she cannot join. So again, I would like to call upon Ambassador Pardo for closing remarks. Please go ahead.
今日はお忙しい中お時間いただき誠にありがとうございます。On behalf of Prime Minister Mejia, that unfortunately is still on a plane coming from Ecuador, busy schedules, of course, of our high-level government officials, and on behalf of the Colombian government, I would like to thank the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, everybody at the team of the foundation, for hosting this event along with us at the Embassy of Colombia in Japan. Migration is a phenomenon that goes beyond borders, and thus countries must gather efforts to address the migration challenge jointly by learning good practices. I wanted also to thank you, our panelists, Dr. Hashimoto, Dr. Viartasiwi, and Mr. Jamins, for sharing their views and providing worldwide and regional perspectives to today's seminar. The increased rates of irregular migrants choosing to risk their lives to seek better conditions to start over represent perhaps one of the biggest challenges. When migrants enter a country through irregular channels, the state lacks vital information about them, including their name, age, gender, as well as their needs and expectations upon arrival. Gathering information on the characteristic of migrant is, as we heard this morning, an important tool to produce effective public policies that address this phenomenon. As Director Espinosa mentioned in his comprehensive presentation and comments and very generous remarks, this is Director Espinosa. Has been a hard work of everybody that put a lot of effort in this seminar today. So thank you for your generous words. The adoption of this TPS in Colombia is being widely recognized by international authorities and will regularize over almost 1 million migrants, enable them to work and to access public and private services, while simultaneously allowing the Colombian state to gather information to feed into the design of more tailored public policies. Colombia is addressing this current migration wave from Venezuela with comprehensive policies to change misconceptions of the negative impact of migration, focusing on the benefits instead. Increasing migration flows are a worldwide reality, and migration crises like the Venezuelan one are a large-scale humanitarian crisis. The international community has a key role to play by ensuring sufficient financial support and building capacity in host countries. More countries need to acknowledge this reality and adopt the evidence-based mindset that sees migration as a development opportunity and an asset. To do so, the international community should start by addressing the obstacles that prevent countries from adopting the regularization policies they need to support both migrants and host communities. Colombia recognizes that Japan and other countries in Asia have been taking steps toward regulating migration and aiming to take decision on the matter. We hope that the Colombian example and experience that we discussed today can contribute to advance on the debate of whether addressing migration as a challenge or as an opportunity. ありがとうございます。
パルド大使、ありがとうございました。改めまして、
Pardo, thank you very much. Once again, I'd like to thank Mr. Espinosa and Dr. Hashimoto, Dr. Nino, and Mr. Jamin for your wonderful contributions. And with this, we would like to bring this seminar to a close. To the participants from Asia, thank you very much for joining from early in the morning. And from Latin America, thank you for joining us at so late at night. We have learned a great deal today, and we hope to make this a useful contribution towards betterment of policies here in Asia. After this, we will migrate to a questionnaire screen. If you could give us your feedback, that will be very useful in making improvements in our programs. Despite COVID-19, I hope that you'll take good care of yourselves and please stay safe. Thank you so very much.
ありがとうございます。